This train may have already come and left the station. Nonetheless, I still decided to put in the 2 cents nobody asked for. Last week, I had the pleasure of watching PewDiePie's playthrough of The Last of Us Part 2. By pleasure, of course I mean anger-inducing, fist-clenching, teeth-gritting frustration roller coaster that is a post-2013 PewDiePie story-oriented playthrough. However, even as dizzy from all the eye-rolling I suffered from watching it, my backseat gamer mentality couldn't pull me away from investing myself in the story. I consider myself a fairly empathetic person, and I find a lot more enjoyment in putting myself through the mindsets and perspectives of characters whose stories are being told, whether it be in a movie or a video game. I recognize not everyone out there plays video games or watches movies for stories, nor do they happen to actively engage themselves in story-oriented games, but simply to pass the time to perhaps allow themselves to relax by focusing their brain power away from stressful, non-productive thoughts to try and therapeutically meditate through visual engagement. That being said, I think I may need some sort of therapy after having experienced this game's story. This video is going to be an extensive review on the story that unfolds, spoiling a lot of scenes and dissecting them in my brain's own attempt to unpack and decompress the things I've witnessed. If you haven't played it, play it. And if you're unable to, I suggest you watch a playthrough. Might I recommend Jacksepticeye for a more story-respected approach? Go and make sure you know what's going on and then come back here and let's talk. And because I have no ties with the developers or actors who wrote, developed, or portrayed anything in the game, I can give my forthright opinion without feeling like I'm hurting my relationship with anyone else, which I think is something a lot of game review articles fail to do. Some people don't trust banks. I don't trust professional game reviews.
And that's just the campaign. Add in a heavy-hitting multiplayer lineup of Versus, Arcade, Horde, and Escape, and it makes Gears 5 one of the best and most versatile action game packages in recent memory.
Opinions like mine have flooded the internet as of recently, while the world tries to process all the information Naughty Dog has thrown at them in this ruthless titan of a story arc. Saying it's one of the most divisive games in recent development would just be an echo of others that have spoken before me. While it's obvious that some people's opinions are fairly bigoted and targeted at certain aspects of the game that disagree with their moral upbringings, others that are big fans of the game use these opinions as excuses to dismiss the criticisms by the mass amounts of people who are unhappy with the game's receival. Even I, for one, think it's easy for someone to tell you how to think. If someone you highly respect and admire exclaims that they're unhappy or dissatisfied with someone's work, for reasons X, Y, and Z, the possibility of being influenced by their perspectives is more than plausible. Not only in the case of being influenced by those like-minded to you, an angry mob mentality is also heavily prominent in today's society and has a much larger effect on the general population than most would likely want to believe. These trends and mindsets, such as the one dubbed cancel culture, can easily become far more hurtful than they can be helpful, spreading ideas more contagious than viruses across the globe without a second thought as to why or if the opposition should be considered. Now, if you've seen PewDiePie's uploaded stream of the game, or even his recent uploads during or shortly after the time he was playing the game, it's no secret that he was dissatisfied with the outcome of the product. I found myself slightly torn between my own feelings and those that were being played out in a reaction right in front of me whilst watching the series. While Felix does seem to have a productive and open mindset, I had to stand by my own feelings when watching the story unfold for various different sections and develop my own opinion on what I thought was the narrative being told. This was easy to slip away from me at times when he wouldn't acknowledge some of the more cinematic elements or took what I thought was far too long to progress from point A to point B.
Didn't we come from there?
I acknowledge these frustrations as being with the lack of that shared experience and not actually parts of the story that I was dissatisfied with. Like I said before, my only experience with this story is that which I watched through the PewDiePie stream. I had no hands-on experience with the controls, never put the controller in my own hands and had to make the quick reactions Ellie and Abby made throughout the game, and I also acknowledge there may be a notable disconnect there. However, I never played the first story's narrative either, The Last of Us Part 1, yet I had an overwhelming amount of respect and appreciation for the game's story. I used to only own an Xbox, and with it being an exclusive to PlayStation, this was one of the first playthroughs I'd seen on YouTube. It's a simplistic, even partially predictable story, but has all of the foundations of good storytelling elements and had them executed excellently. Again, without trying to repeat what most people have already said, it's clear that Naughty Dog has gone with a different approach with this second title. After watching a video uploaded by Legacy Killa HD, who's done extensive research on the game's development and interviews with the creative directors and narrators, I highly recommend you watch this as well, as it gives insight to some of the mindsets of the team as well as their expectations of the receivable. It's clear that they knew they were doing something that was going to make people very uncomfortable. When the leaks of the ending came through, by all of which I read afterwards rang true, they doubled down on their decision to promote the different approach they decided to go forward with in this sequence of events. Actor Troy Baker was a heavy advocate for pushing the players to play the game with an open mind and truly focus on accepting the style of storytelling they chose to go with. I won't lie, the cancel culture got to me in this regard, not in the sense where I wished the failure of the game, but the overwhelming dissatisfaction with the game was enough for me not to purchase the game myself, which I'd originally planned to do so. The leaks had fans comparing the ending of the story to that of Game of Thrones' Season 8 finale, an ending that was widely criticized and, bluntly put, hated and disgusted by the fans of the series, that resulted in a petition of over 1.8 million people demanding that it be retold differently. Being on the observational end of this news, and still having to mentally recover from the ending of that show myself, along with the utter chaos and disappointment of the year that is 2020, I didn't believe I was ready to be put through that again. Another small part of me also believed I didn't deserve to have an opinion on the game's story as a whole, tied with the first, because I didn't even play the first game hands-on myself. However, I still kept myself away from the spoilers in the event that I might decide to give it a chance, and it appears boredom is a fantastic motivator, even if it means going through physical/mental pain. Michael Stevens' YouTube Red experiment rings true.
We dislike being bored so much. Sometimes physical pain is preferable.
I know I'm kind of dragging Felix through the mud here, but even he acknowledges his lack of compliance to the game's attempts to guide him in the narrative.
A fucking roller coaster. I don't really care that much about... Like, I'm not mad about it. It's not my game. I can't control what's gonna happen. It's not up to me. This is what they wanted to do. They went with it. But what? Some parts? Oh my god. Such a meme, some parts. God, there's so much to think about.
Regardless of the quality of the playthrough, and as to not talk myself in circles, I want to revisit some of the scenes that gave me the everlasting impression that's haunted me for the past couple of days. And because I have zero experience with the hands-on gameplay, I won't be talking at all in terms of the element being that I have no reason to comment on it. Ellie's all grown up, age 19, which puts us 5 years in the future from the events of the last game. She's much more of a contemplator and is growing out of her My Chemical Romance phase. The game is much darker this time around, so bright and naive Ellie is no longer with us. But that doesn't make us dislike her in any way. If anything, she seems to be a pretty good embodiment of what it's like to be at that age. Still trying to find herself and living day to day until she figures out what her purpose is in life. She finds out soon enough. Unfortunately, there's something that I have to address that may be the best and worst part of the game. It's Joel's death. There's so much to say that most of the information in my head might get lost in translation to words, but I'm gonna try my best. It's the driving force of the main protagonist, Ellie, and never really lets you forget, would that even be possible? Joel was by far one of the most beloved characters of the series to anyone that was a fan of the game. You kind of had to be in order to have experienced the story as a whole before the second game. A man loses his daughter tragically and then goes 20 years fending for himself without a purpose or a cause, Hell, he all but admits that he's killed innocent people before.
How did you know?
Know what?
About the ambush.
I've been on both sides.
Oh. So, you kill a lot of innocent people? I'll take that as a yes.
Take it however you want.
He's done some of the worst things a person can do, not just to stay alive, but because he had no reason to himself not to. Then suddenly he's found a reason to be human again, and a purpose for himself by protecting this girl Ellie in a smuggling job to travel the country and cure the world of the sickness that's been ravaging the earth for the past 20 years. Though, as strong as he wasn't strong enough to let her go once he found out that developing a vaccine, which didn't have a 100% chance, mind you, would kill the girl he'd developed a relationship with. He's a big, gritty shithead through most of the first game. I listened to Jack's thoughts about Joel at the end of the second game, where he says Joel was a piece of shit.
A lot of people are pissed about the Joel death because they really like Joel from the first game, which is great because he's a very interesting character and he's one of my favorite gaming characters, and I really loved him in the first game. But a lot of people seem to hail him as a hero. It's like he's the hero of the first game, and then coming into this one, they're like, oh, they did Joel dirty, just killing him like that. Joel is not a hero. Joel as a character in The Last of Us 1 is an absolute piece of shit.
And I was a little put back by it, thinking that's not really what I thought, but I went back to watch the first game, of course, to remind myself that it's not the series as a whole that killed me, it was just part 2. And I wasn't as sure by the end of it. But the character development is what makes him so admirable and likable, even if he's not a great guy. By the end of the first game, I wouldn't mind if he killed my entire family right in front of me to get Ellie out of safety. Like, fuck man, I get it. And eventually, he softens up, to turn into a strong father figure for the girl, and she trusts him, to an extent. It's obvious she'd have some questions as to why she woke up in the car on her way out of the city with her hospital gown still on, and when Joel directly lied to her about the reason there was no cure, she was willing to accept it for the moment. It was especially satisfying to see the scene of Joel bringing Ellie the guitar. First thing to recognize is the acting was absolutely sensational. Motion capture has come so far, and while narratives and cinematic scenes in video games have become so well developed, there is just not enough praise for them. Avoiding a ramble about how video games as a medium of entertainment are underappreciated, the main focal point of what I'm trying to say is that the scene plays out incredibly well. You can feel the tension in the air around your own seat, seeing Joel silently scramble for words and make small talk to try and create conversation and maintain the relationship that is clearly awkward in the moment. This scene takes place shortly after they left the Firefly hospital base, and there still seems to be some unease from Ellie as she doesn't wholeheartedly believe Joel's lie about the cure. He brings her a gift, and that gift is a guitar. But before passing it to her, he plays his rendition of Pearl Jam's Future Days. Though I'd never heard the song before, it'll forever be a part of me, given that I'd probably listened to it 10,000 times since then, trying not to drench myself in my own tears thinking of this scene with the two characters. With Joel's gentle, grizzled voice accompanying his fingerstyle playing, and Ellie's entrapment in the gesture, it's truly a sight to behold. The emotional grasp it had on me felt unreal, and matching up the lyrics to their relationship, or as a conveyance to Ellie of how much she meant to him, was honestly overwhelming, even in the lyrics that he didn't sing. The sheepish courage he mustered up in that moment to perform for her, you can see the reaction on his face of how vulnerable he allowed himself to be. I can't express enough how powerful this scene was to me, an unadulterated piece of art in just 7 minutes. He gives the guitar to her as a gift and she lightens up a little bit. Then you're reminded of the closeness they shared towards the end of the last game. With this scene still fresh in mind, Naughty Dog does the unthinkable and tears our hearts directly out of our chests in less than 2 hours' time. After this, it jumps forward in time to a few dialogue pieces between Ellie and her new love interest, explaining the events of the previous night, which explains that there are complications in Ellie and Joel's relationship. The scene that follows has got to be one of the most traumatizing pieces of entertainment out there, aside from The Walking Dead episode 1 of season 7, when Negan and his Louisville slugger Lucille are introduced to the crew, who they thought were on top of the world, or just about any major character death in Game of Thrones, the first 7 seasons, of course. After being introduced to the deuteragonist, it's a fun word, right? The person second in importance to the protagonist in a drama, Abby. It's unknown what her character's intentions or goals are, but you see a deadly determination nonetheless. She goes off on her own to accomplish a mission unknown to the player, producing the first and foremost dumb move in any piece of survival horror.
Well, I guess we better split up and look around.
If only she feared running into cannibal corpses as much as she did heights.
What the fuck is that?
That's the bridge.
Lev.
Follow me.
Fuck.
Of course, it gets her into trouble, and she's quickly overwhelmed by the horde of runners she attempts to maneuver around, moving down a snowy mountainside. Just as things are looking too bleak to return from, a guardian angel in the form of Joel Miller and his brother Tommy take the time out of their busy day to help this poor innocent bystander from certain death. The friendly neighborhood Miller brothers help guide her out of the area, and reiterating how it is so well detailed, you can actually see the look on her face that she knows exactly who they are. She exclaims that she has a group of survivors not too far from the area that's secure and they could hold up there. After a few close encounters on their way to the site, they get everyone inside to regroup. And all it took was a few introductions, and then Abby's physical Instagram appreciation post was underway in the form of a fucking shotgun slug to Joel's right leg while his brother is incapacitated by the rest of the group. Many people start pushing back while analyzing this moment, giving the notion that no, there's no way Joel would even be in a position to be vulnerable. He's always been especially cautious and never trusted anybody he didn't know, while simultaneously referencing the scene where he ran over a hunter in the first game that was fiending cries for help. Now he wants to go into the center of a room full of people he doesn't know and introduce himself under the same identity of the man who committed the world's largest betrayal to the human race just 5 short years ago? Listen, I won't pretend to argue either side because I didn't study the character in depth to play the role, nor did I conceptualize the character's existence. I believe this sort of claim could be made by somebody who's done immense amounts of research about the character or personally embodied the character for performance like Troy Baker. So, unless someone asks him what he thinks Joel would have really done, let's just take the scene for it. As previously mentioned, Naughty Dog tears a page from The Walking Dead's torture methods, and Abby works on her golf swing using Joel's neck as the tee for his metaphorical melon-sized golf ball as a head. Ellie arrives just in time to see Joel's last moments, and the scene does enough to make you think that there could still be some sort of hope that he could still make it out alive. She walks through the door and witnesses what's unfolding, but before she can pull the trigger, she's ambushed by those that are working in tandem with Abby. Forced to the ground, unable to turn away, she meets Joel's gaze through his swollen eye socket as she continuously pleads for him to do something, or the others to make it stop, and oh my god, are you fucking kidding me? Just talking about it gets me fucking worked up. Really, Abby? You know what pissed me off? Is Video Game Donkey had the audacity to state,
"In the world of Last of Us Part 2, one hateful act begets another, but a selfless act can also be contagious."
Which perfectly describes why Tiger Woods over here was just practicing her golf swing as a friendly gesture to Joel saving her goddamn life. Not a second thought, no hesitation. Just let him have a taste of every inch of that iron rod. As you can see, this would make anyone and everyone who loves Joel a little upset. and definitely sets the tone for the game, as now my shirt has officially been burned off of my skin through the amount of fiery rage that flows within me, and my hatred for the character that is Abigail Anderson. While I shared another layer of contempt for Nora, especially when she called Joel a little bitch, holy fuck, my veins popped from overheating. The forgettable man bun ponytail bendejo, obviously for spitting on Joel's dead body, and the others who were involved, the sole focus of the mission was to murder Abigail in all the terrible ways Ellie can think of. It was truly an unforgivable act. And that's what the game would lead you to believe. Let's get you nice and pissed off so there's a sense of pride and achievement when you finally get to twist that dagger in Abby's steel six-pack of a torso while you look into her eyes and let her know that you've actually developed a cure, and it's for Abby's worthless life and the cure is death. You begin your journey throughout the city of Seattle, Washington, tearing through members of the militia group WLF, while having heartfelt moments with Ellie's miraculous ability to find a guitar anywhere she goes.
No way.
Triggering warm memories as well as really cold, bitter ones. I'll touch on these later as well. As you hunt down each member that was there at the murder banquet, trying to track down the elusive Ox, it comes with another dehumanizing act of brutally cutting down their lives in some of the most gruesome ways. Each one obviously has a lasting effect on Ellie, with the beatdown of Nora, the forced hand against Owen, and killing pregnant Mel. For myself in these perspectives, I was still far too blinded by rage to really have it weigh heavy on my mind about that consequence. I mean, sure, it hit at first, and I thought to myself, you gotta be kidding me, she was fucking pregnant? God damn it. But I wasn't disgusted with Ellie's character. It was a consequence of the situation. To say that there were other pressing matters is incredibly selfish when it comes to that of an unborn child, but it's not like Mel was taking any precautions beforehand, which we learn later on. Tommy helps secure Ellie back to the theater. Ellie wakes up next to Dina and heads into the theater room where everyone's ready to go back home, even though the only one left alive is the one that was originally sought after. Tommy was ready to give up even. Sure, Dina needed to get home because she's pregnant and they just drop that on you in the middle of nowhere, but how is it all plausible that Ellie would even consider giving up on the mission now? It'd be better to say that she was lying and planned to sneak off later and take care of it when everyone else was asleep or something. But to just shrug her shoulders and be like, you win some, you lose some. Especially when coming so close, all of this goes for Tommy too. As Tommy goes into the other room, Abby uses the force of a Halo brute to pin him down to the ground with a gun trained on him, which sends Jesse, a character we were just barely becoming familiar with, through the door for help, to which he gets absolutely fucking dabbed on by Abby's Deadeye mode. 1 second he's there and the next he's completely forgotten about, which is a harsh truth about the writing of this character. Penguin Zero said it best when he pointed out,
just gets shot and it's like he never existed. It's like that bullet fucking erased him from the universe's memory.
This seems to be a common problem among storylines that try to introduce a slew of new side characters and try to develop them into prominent roles. Too many characters nobody ever gets to really know, and then when they're gone, not only do their deaths mean very little to the storyline, but it costs the immersion of the environment when the characters don't even acknowledge the death of someone that was closer to them than the viewers are to the main characters on screen. You'd think there'd be a scene with Dina and Nellie visiting his grave at some point, or recalling a time when he was alive and saying that they missed him, because even if he wasn't Dina's choice for a partner, he was a wholehearted friend who risked his life to bring them back to safety of the Jackson settlement. Now that Tommy is once again incapacitated, and Ellie is at a standstill with no moves to make other than to meet the demands of Abby's requests at the interest of Tommy's life, it seems like this could be it for our protagonist. Though surely she must have some sort of an idea up her sleeve on how to get out of it.
The only way to find out is to stay tuned to the next exciting episode of Dragon Ball Z.
The pause button on the most intense part of the game hits harder than any sort of blue balls you've ever had in your whole life. And yes, ladies, it's a real thing and it hurts. But not as bad as this. From here on out, you get to play the whole thing over again. Yes, absolutely. I know, it's fantastic. Now, listen, I know your balls hurt really, really bad right about now. But here's where it gets interesting. And trust me, you're going to love this. You're going to get to experience Abby's side of the story. Huh? This is essentially the equivalent of having intercourse with the lovely partner you've chosen to be with, and just at the point of climax, your partner is switched out with a fucking pig. Not only are you turned off, or maybe some of you are more turned on and it only goes up from there, I don't know, some of you are fucking gross, but now you have to reach that climax again with something you are utterly disgusted and repulsed by, not only because it's not your partner, but because it's a fucking pig. Please note, I'm not calling Abby a pig, nor am I exclaiming that Owen likes having sex with pigs, but it is just such a sucker punch to the milk-filled titty that they would have you at the point where the metaphorical zit of this story is about to pop, and then they just reset it to try and get a different perspective. Truly and respectively, I absolutely understand the goal here. I don't think most people were relatively confused when they stepped into the shoes of Abby from Seattle's day one. It's just the simple fact that nobody wanted it. And there's always the argument that some people don't know what's best for them, but I think in terms of most entertainment purposes, actively making you act as the bad guy when just moments before you were the good guy is far too uncomfortable of a transition to make. Really, I think this strategy could have worked had it been timed differently. The game uses flashbacks like it's cashing out sick time at the end of the fiscal year. Instead of consistently using these to patch up pieces of memory, perhaps just put the game in chronological order. Trade between characters in the moment. If you could develop a relationship with Abby's character beforehand, then reveal she was the one who killed Joel earlier in the year, then I think it'd weigh much more on the player's conscience that it's not so easy to go through without avenging his death. However, as I'm writing this in contemplation of how everything has played out thus far, why would the player care anyway? Ellie is the protagonist of the story. The Last of Us has consistently pertained to two characters, Ellie and Joel. While the player might learn about Abby's past and how her character truly begins to grow away from the senseless loyalty to the WLF organization and eventually finds herself others to care about, it's not like Ellie knows. Ellie still wouldn't think twice about killing Abby when she saw her. Showing the player Abby's history has absolutely no effect on Ellie's character choices. In my high school AP English class, yes, it was high school, but the teacher thought she was a college professor and it was fucking ruthless, harder than any college class I actually took in the future. My teacher gave us a piece of advice in storytelling that really resonated with me. When delivering information to the receiving party, you do not want to add any tedious details that do not need to be there. Constantly ask yourself in the shoes of the recipient, why do I care? If you can answer this in your head with the information you've been given, then it's worth it to keep it. If not, you don't need it. People like to make jokes back then about The Walking Dead, and there was even a statistic done about how much time the camera shows the group just walking and nothing else. Cinematic B-roll is one thing, but forcing the player to go through empty sections with zero tension, dialogue, or sense of motivation?
Cool scene. This is forced.
Here.
This is so fucking slow. God damn it.
Circling back, why the fuck do I care about what Abby's done? Like I said, I feel fairly empathetic to most situations, especially for narrative's sake. But you can't expect to empathize with everyone and everything. Emotional empathy takes mental resources, and these resources are currently in full force for the character that's earned them. And there's a limited amount. Designating mental resources to Abby, to me, takes away from those that I've already given to Ellie. So already, you have a conflict of interest with the storytelling aspect. And most people will get lost at this point as they don't have any motivation to proceed. Why do we, as a character, care? What's our motivation? Why do we want to know what happens?
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
As I stated previously, the driving force of the main character's actions derive from the death of Joel. But in Abby's timeline, there is no death of Joel, at least not equivalent to Abby. Abby got her revenge. Now we're just experiencing her day to day. Surely you could argue she's sinking her AWOL companion Owen, but I don't give a shit. I have no tie to these characters, and I can't suddenly act like I do. Who cares about Owen? Who gives a fuck about Abby? And for the love of God, Mel, we get it, you're fucking pregnant. I will say that, very shallowly, I can empathize with the characters in Abby's story to some extent. I want to let it be on record that I think her acting was done terrifically, and I don't think she was at all downplayed in her performance. But the performance can't always outdo the writing, and her character wasn't written charismatic enough for her to be accepted after her heinous act. Her love interest, Owen, seems to be the textbook feel-good nice guy whose only character flaw is that he can't stay faithful to his partner. His partner, Mel, however, seems entirely disagreeable and serves as a teenage-level antagonist for Abby's storyline, a mere obstacle in the love connection between her and Owen. Easily the worst character in the game, or in any game this year. Of course, I'm a cis white male, so maybe it's entirely wrong for me to say such things. But please coherently explain to me how you wouldn't be an absolute liability to a militia team on the front lines at war with another cult-like group that has modern, long-distance weapons by being 7 to 8 months pregnant, and for what? Because she didn't want to sit around feeling useless? I guess the WLF only needs to run by sending their units as cannon fodder into needless recon missions. Otherwise, you're allowed to sit around and do absolutely nothing else, as long as your conscience isn't telling you that you're being lazy. Manny's character has unfortunately little to no depth, other than his apparent drinking habits, his colorful Spanish vocabulary, and his ability to tighten my fist hard enough to warp metal. Luckily, his character didn't last long in this story arc, but it really is a shame that he wasn't introduced at all as more than just a racially diverse character. It continually makes me shake my head wondering what the point of it all was. A couple of the most interesting characters in Abby's story arc were Lev and Yara. The quote-unquote politics of the game never seemed so in-your-face as some people have claimed, but in the explanation of Lev's character from Yara, it did seem a little forced. The game could have continued without explanation, more just inference, and I'm sure the player could have picked up on the notion, or perhaps a direct explanation from Lev himself, rather than from his sister. This one's a little more picky, but it just seems to me like the concept of a trans character could have been introduced more subtly than having it spelled out to us. It feels very cliche, like when a camera cuts to a hideout of some bank robbers developing a plan for a big heist, and the brains of the operation always has to say, "All right, let's go over the plan one more time." Might as well leave the director yelling "cut" and the boom mic operator standing off to the side because my shroud of immersion is fucking ruined. Nonetheless, these two characters had the most to them that encouraged you to know more. But why these characters and not the others, you might ask? I can give you a hint. It probably had to do with the fact that they had no part in Joel's death. A brother and sister on the run from an extremist cult-like group that wants to prosecute Lev for taking his life into his own hands and not playing by their rules? No loyalty to the faction they came from, and nowhere to go but away from home in search of better days. That, in and of itself, is a story that would be worth exploring. What's also slightly gut-wrenching is that after all the effort Lev and Abby went through to try and save Yara's life, which takes about a third of her story arc, she dies anyway! She fires on the leader of the WLF to give Abby and Lev a chance to get away. From this point, it draws parallels from the first game, in that an unlikely pair are put together that develop a relationship while trying to survive with each other. Unfortunately for the player, it's far too late for another story like this. In fact, by this time, I imagine the player is exhausted. Even as a bystander without a controller in my hand, I wanted nothing to do with this portion of the game, and I had the ability to skip to the end. No way in hell I'd want to be forced to play through it. Eventually, it all comes back to where things were before the insatiable apocalyptic YouTube rewind took place. We're back in the theater, Abby's pinned down Tommy, Jesse's dead, and Ellie is bargaining for Tommy's life. And what a relief it is to finally see Ellie. With the past 10 to 15 hours having been centered around Abby, surely you'd have built a respect for her that would have you analyzing the following events more carefully, right? Nope. Fuck that bitch. It was a breath of fresh air to see Ellie's face come up from behind that half wall. Finally, we could settle this thing and get it over with, because this story has gone on far too long already. Except, wait a minute. It's not switching back to Ellie. Come on, game. Very funny. Surely you wouldn't... But why? Why? Why would you do that? I don't want to do this. Why am I doing this? The perspective doesn't change. And while Ellie is a formidable opponent, our boy Joel has taught her very well, you're forced to choke slam her into the ground and, looking at my notes, break her fucking arm? Dina comes in to try and save the day, but she's no match for Abby's massive biceps and is quickly subdued. Ellie exclaims that she's pregnant, and Abby's response is, good? Excuse me, but what the fuck? Sure, Ellie killed Mel, and we all know that Mel was pregnant, and Abby doesn't know that Ellie didn't know, but what kind of a fucking monster would think that would be an admirable character trait? I can hardly even see Joel looking at a pregnant woman that tried to fuck him up and think to himself, I hope this bitch is pregnant so that it makes my enemy feel worse. Again, I'm not Joel, I didn't play Joel, I didn't write Joel, so I don't know. Abby swears against their lives and demands that they never see each other again, as Ellie is choking on her own bloody nose, physically crippled by pain. So congratulations, you win. I think. No? I don't know. You were playing as Abby and you won the fight, so you win, right? This game is so fucking unbelievable. Fast forward, Ellie is living on a ranch, healed up, reminiscing on Joel's old material items. There's a baby, JJ. I'm unsure what the name is in longevity, but I'm gonna pretend it's Joel, or Joel times 2. And Dina lives with Ellie. They have their adorable little moment that depicts everything is okay and that life goes on. They even have sheep, for some reason. Unfortunately, this image is shattered in the wake of Ellie's PTSD from witnessing the event that was Joel's death. And believe me, Ellie, I get it. Dina comforts her, and they return to the house. Tommy comes over a few days later, I think. The only explanation they ever gave us to how time progressed forward is by the baby bumps, and by this time, there are no Mels to tell us how much time has passed. Explaining he and his wife had taken some time apart from each other. He's clearly wounded, likely from the previous battle he had with Abby, and it's even more clear why he and his wife took some time apart when he mentions that he's caught Abby's trail. Dina interjects that they're done with the concept of revenge and they've moved past it, while Ellie confirms. This makes Tommy upset and causes him to spout some hurtful comments at the two of them before storming out. While Dina goes to chew him out, Ellie is left to reflect on the possibility of actually having another chance to exact revenge against her apocalyptic father's killer. It's clear that it leaves an impact on her, as the following night she's unable to sleep. She closes the windows in her house and picks up the guitar in her living room to play a song. What follows is another flashback that plays the night that happened before Joel's death. The last few already haven't been pleasant, remnants of their relationship, but this one hurts worse when it shows that Ellie got shitty with Joel when he intervened with a verbal dispute between her and some homophobic boomer at the party. It was one of the moments where you know that Ellie had every right to be mad, but you couldn't help but feel bad for Joel. Another round of applause for the acting in this regard. The facial animations, as well as the detail in the voice and the body language that made this scene come alive, showed Joel's remorse, because you know he only did it because he loved her and he cared about her. He just wants her to be okay, and god damn it, Ellie, why do you have to be so mean? Surely this can't be the last conversation that they had. That would be so fucking cruel! The next scene is Ellie getting ready to venture out, obviously to California, to complete what she had started. It's a little questionable at this point, given that she has more to live for than she had previously. Joel was a focal point of her existence, and it was easy to say she had nothing to lose when she went on the venture to bring him justice, but now she has a partner and a kid to look after. Nonetheless, it's not like she could just call up a therapist on BetterHelp and go through the baby steps to recovering her mental health. If this is what was gonna fix it, by all means, I'm down to fucking party. Dina explains that if Ellie goes through with this, Dina won't be waiting around for her to return because she doesn't want to wonder if Ellie is alive or dead the entire time. Ellie acknowledges this and leaves anyway. Of course. At this point, I was entirely fed up with how long this had been dragged out. I don't even fully understand all the events that unfolded. Abby and Lev were looking for the Fireflies and traded equipment for information in a scene that wasn't shown to the viewer. They find an old radio that seemed to be part of an old Firefly hideout. She comes in contact with an unknown recipient who claims they're a Firefly and that they're awaiting her arrival, which turned out to be an ambush. They step outside to be ambushed by a local faction called the Rattlers. Ooh, spooky. And these strangers are able to successfully subdue Thing 1 and Thing 2. Ellie arrives a couple months later and proceeds to fuck shit up against all realms of possibility, infiltrating an unknown enemy base and a location she's completely unfamiliar with, all in the name of Joel. She finds out where Abby is from Fat Geralt, makes her way to the prison that she was held, and finds out from the prisoner that Abby's been bit? Maybe that piece of dialogue was meant to be towards Ellie, given that she had just gotten bit moments earlier, but they were directly talking about the whereabouts of Abby, then mentioned she's probably already dead.
Hey, where's Abby? She's bit!
Keep back!
Hey, don't put that fucking thing in me!
Hey! Abby tried to escape. She's down in the pillars.
The pillars?
Head down to the beach. You won't miss it. She's probably already dead.
Anyways, Ellie sets foot out again to the beach to verify Abby is still alive, and thank goodness the Rattlers kept their armory right next to the holding cells. It'd be a real shame if the prisoners were to ever get out and look for weapons to exact their revenge on the facility in a Revolution-esque type freedom battle that allows the real hero of the story uninterrupted FaceTime with the story's deuteragonist. She comes across a crucifixion-type site where multiple people are, what seems like, to starve and rot on their posts. She identifies Abby, though it was a little harder this time given she didn't look like the female version of Ronnie Coleman, cuts her down from her post, and Abby frees a nearby Lev. Ellie, still processing seeing Abby in the flesh, follows Abby to the water bank where there are some boats they could use to get away from the site, because Abby knows that somehow. It's only once Lev is secure in a boat that Ellie officially is ready to lay down her life on the line to give one last fight to the death. What with her wounded state and Abby's lack of gains, it was sure to be an eventful fight. Abby refuses at first, so Ellie plays dirty with Lev's life. This fucking script is near 12 pages now, and I'm as exhausted writing it as I was watching the end of this game. There's really no way to dance around the fact that Ellie ends up letting Abby live in the final moments of the fight, because while Abby might have lost her gains, she gained the ability to fucking breathe underwater. I suppose it's notable that Abby bit Ellie's left ring and pinky fingers off in a single chomp, probably a withdrawal from protein. For whatever reason, Abby's murder and not the murder of Nora, Mel, nor Owen, and Abby doesn't think twice and gets on the boat and leaves, rightfully so. Ellie comes back to the ranch, where only a ghost of the life she had with Dina remains. All of Dina's belongings were gone. The only thing left was Ellie's things in a separate room. On the ground lay the guitar that Joel gifted her the night he performed for her. She takes it out and attempts to play that same song that she was emotionally unable to play before, except this time she's physically unable to play because her fingers are fucking gone. She reflects one last time on the last moment she shared with Joel, other than the 18 holes she walked in on. Joel sits on his porch playing his guitar, and to his surprise, Ellie shows up. They go through some small talk before she explains the nature of her anger and that she's still very angry with him about the fact that he lied to her. And his response?
If somehow the Lord gave me a second chance at that moment, I would do it all over again.
I swear to God, don't make me cry. She says that she doesn't know if she can forgive him, but she's willing to try. When they say goodbye, Joel's voice cracks in sadness to the situation, and I'm gonna punch a fucking hole through the cement wall because this was the last moment they shared with each other. For me, that's not good enough. I know that life isn't fair and that Joel's death came untimely and that sometimes things happen and you say things you wish you wouldn't have said, but are you fucking kidding me? This isn't some self-torture chamber I put myself into because I feel like my life's too good. For fuck's sake, 2020 fucking sucks already. A god-awful tragedy isn't what I needed, nor hoped for in a sequel for this well-renowned game. She snaps out of it and lays the guitar up against the windowsill and then leaves the ranch. Roll credits. Before I start crying uncontrollably at my inability to hold Ellie nor Joel and reunite them, let me also note that her inability to play the guitar is heavier than it seems. I did scroll through some of the comments on that video that mentioned she could always learn to play left-handed, as only 3 fingers are really all that's necessary to pick or strum. Being a guitar player, I was impressed that I didn't think of it myself. I've seen left-handed players. I've even seen upside-down left-handed players. Seriously. So perhaps she can always relearn, right? Unfortunately, the analytical side of me sees the fact that she laid the guitar against the windowsill is a sign that she's moving forward from Joel and is choosing to move on from his death. Not just because it wouldn't be favorable to lug a guitar everywhere that she went, but every time she played, it just reminded her more of him and she couldn't get around it. Now, with her inability to play, it's not as easy to remember him as he was, and she didn't want to lose that. I might be reaching here, but I'm also in self-consolation because they thought it was cool to play with my heart. The point is, she has no intentions of relearning how to play. Quick mental fuckery recap. Ellie lost Joel, Jesse, Dina, and Tommy, because why would she go back to Tommy just to tell him she let Abby go? And Abby lives on. The thing the whole story was about was never accomplished, and there was nothing gained from it, only lost. Now, do not come at me with that "there's the lesson" bullshit, because if I had the opportunity, I would have continued to drown Abby until she died. Probably would have done worse by that point. I could have forgiven everything that was lost in the event that Ellie still got revenge, but she didn't even get that. There was no monologue of Joel telling her revenge is wrong. It's not like Dina was killed by a zombie and her last few words were that she should make peace with Abby like she was Carl from The Walking Dead, at least. Then we would have had some sort of gnawing conscience to let Abby go. And surely Joel would tear through the whole world to find Abby and fuck her up if she killed Ellie instead. You saw what he did just to find her when she got kidnapped as some sick asshole's pet. Not to mention he destroyed an entire goddamn hospital to get her out alive. The satisfaction you get as Marcus Phoenix to stab the Locust Queen at the end of the game in Gears of War 3 while you look her in the eye and call her a bitch was unparalleled.
Feel that? That's from Dom. And everyone else you killed, you bitch.
Even John Marsden from Red Dead Redemption 2 was willing to lose the relationship with Abigail to avenge Arthur and kill Micah.
That's your business. His business is here.
Yeah, I'll ride with you.
No, I'm begging you. No! You'd risk all this? For what? For Micah?
All this wouldn't exist if it weren't for Arthur, Sadie, and all the folks that fell. If I let him go, this place ain't no more real than one of Jack's dragons.
I'm begging you.
And I'm begging you to understand. This is it. This is...
Please.
Please try to... I ain't got no other choice. Keep an eye on the place for me.
Of course.
Please.
Let's go kill this son of a bitch then.
While revenge is a luxury, Ellie goddamn well paid her price for it. She should have got it. I think what I'm trying to say is that the story's ending leaves you feeling like such shit that it's not even worth it. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of stories that give a feeling of hopelessness and tragedies that don't have happy endings that work flawlessly. A sense of deprivation and sadness can go a long way, and a lot of times are pieces of art. A work of fiction that makes you feel so deeply that it shakes your inner core and rattles your emotions is a lot of times spectacular in its own way. However, there's gotta be some ups to brace for those downs. In the first game, Ellie and Joel got in plenty of arguments where they clashed, which made for some great emotional scenes. But the game doesn't end on those scenes, and those scenes aren't one after the other. They trade off. One scene, they're in a screaming match over their past, and in the next, Joel softens up and decides he's changed his mind. Instead of this game, it feels like every step of the way, especially towards the end, the game beats you down to the ground, and in the end, as you can see, it's not even worth getting back up. Ellie and Joel are fighting. Ellie loses Joel. Ellie goes to Seattle for revenge, finds out Dina's pregnant. Ellie mutilates Nora for information. Ellie sees Dina sick. Ellie kills Owen and a pregnant woman. Hey, at least Jesse's there, and so is Tommy. Tommy gets beat up, and Jesse dies. Ellie gets beat the fuck out of at the hands of the player, no less. Oh, now we're on a ranch and things are nice? Nope. PTSD is a motherfucker. Ellie loses Dina to a revenge mission. Ellie loses her fingers in a fight, and then Ellie fucking doesn't finish the job. Ellie plays guitar, but can't. Ellie remembers her last conversation with Joel, which was not happy, and then Ellie has absolutely nothing but her recent memories of Joel to dwell on how poor the relationship ended. This is all without the fact that we had an unimpressive 10-hour attempt to sympathize with Abby that held no merit, at least for myself, in the end. And to twist the knife, Ellie stated in the first game her biggest fear in life was ending up alone.
What are you scared of?
Let's see. Scorpions are pretty creepy. Being by myself. I'm scared of ending up alone.
Yeah, just let that shit sit for a minute. While you're bleeding out, you might want to write your will before you pass out. When your family walks in like, what the fuck happened? Just make sure this video is playing in the background and they'll have everything they need to know. I feel like I'm repeating myself here, but just to drive it home one more time, Ellie has lost absolutely everyone and everything she ever cared about. She's completely alone, which is her worst fear, and the game's motivation to play from the start to the end is never even accomplished.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
I'm no writer, and I can't say what would make a spectacular story. I only know what I don't like when I see it. Unfortunately, that's the picky side of consumers, and I can't get around mine. Perhaps Abby shouldn't have been playable at all. Maybe we should have started with her. I think it would have been a little more beneficial if we got to play as Ellie during their first boss fight event with each other, even if it meant losing in a triggered QuickTime event. I didn't want to play as Abby and fight against somebody that I enjoyed. I agree that to make a substantial impact, the viewer had to lose something, and Joel would have been a lasting impact, but to kick you right in the titties straight out the gate while you're not looking just hurts as bad as it sounds. And having Joel so helplessly beaten with no fight back, metaphorically caught with his pants down, and some people state that it's disrespectful to the character.
And then also the killing off of all of the main characters. And I don't even want to talk about how Joel died. It's upsetting. Joel, I said this in my previous one, like, he reminds me of parts of myself, just how I have dealt with grief. And he reminds me of my dad, who has passed away. And just like it just seemed like shocking and vile and violent for no reason. And it just is just another example of how fucking shallow this fucking game is.
And I have a hard time disagreeing. He couldn't even say a word to Ellie when she came in. He quite literally was a human piñata with no chance of escape. Surely he would suffer the consequences of his actions from dooming humanity of their chance to bounce back, but he died like a fucking bitch. Which sucks, because he did not live like a bitch.
Ellie!
Where's the operating room? I ain't got time for this. Where?
Where? Oh, shit! What the? No, wait!
Well, what about the guy?
He ain't even hurt.
Alone in the city, come by, feeding by.
What do you want me to do? What?
Move!
2, 3.
The only thing they didn't add was him pleading for his life. I can't imagine what it's like to create a work of art that's so well received, but then to try and follow it up years later with only disappointment to fans. The first story was simplistic, absolutely. It's a story we've heard told 1,000 different ways. Two people don't like each other, they spend lots of time together, get to know each other, they bond, then they're inseparable, and together they're better than apart. Though, it doesn't seem like they're hurting from it at all, given that it's the fastest selling PlayStation exclusive to date. When the leaks came out, they doubled down on their defense of the experience and stated that it would surely divide fans. What I found interesting is that it didn't seem like this was the original story plot that they were going to go with when they first released the trailer in 2016, given Joel was still fucking alive, unless they were lying to us. It's obvious that the main theme was revenge, but centered against the Fireflies. They also marketed it as if Joel might have had more screen time than a death scene, and I'm sure that's what a lot of people would want. Who knows, maybe we'll get lots of that in the HBO series they've yet to air. While I might have originally said that the game doesn't necessarily push an agenda on the public like a large amount of people like to say it does, I shortly realized after writing all of this down for analysis that only the characters with prominent politically provoking traits, such as androgyny and sexuality, were the only main characters left alive. Ellie, Dina, Abby, and Lev. Exclusion of Tommy, since he qualifies as a side character having less screen time than Jesse. Sexuality defining a character's personality diminishes the value of that character substantially, given that while inclusion is still important, No one wants to be around someone else specifically for their sexuality, so why would you want to follow a character with no personality? In a modern story setting, it's just as likely to say that every single main character is a part of the LGBTQ+ community as it is to say that they aren't. I know Abby doesn't fit that role completely, as she doesn't have any definitive affiliations for her identity in the game, only coming off as a physically strong female character, but that body type is highly associated with even the above average masculine male physique. Before this point gets me into any more trouble than it already has, I'll summarize by saying that the game centers around Ellie, who happens to be gay, Dina, who is bisexual and makes heavy sexual advancements on Ellie, Abby, who has arms like Fat Geralt,
Arms like mine?
and Lev, who is transgender. Joel, Jesse, Nora, Owen, Mel, and Manny, all presumed straight, all dead. I could talk myself in circles all day about this game, which I suppose is a victory for Naughty Dog in its own way. It's hard not to feel cheated or disrespected in some way, like they spitefully took the greatest parts that we enjoyed away from us. But they can tell the story however they want, and all we can do as consumers is observe. I just feel like it wasn't worth it to experience, and sadly I'm disappointed. There's a story there, sure, but it hurts, and not the good kind of hurt either. More like you lost your job and you're getting kicked out of your house kind of hurt. Not the Hugh Jackman Wolverine I finally have a family hurt.
This is what it feels like.
More like the holy shit, I just killed my whole family to save them and I actually didn't need to and now I'm alone times 10 kind of hurt. Perhaps it was the greatest marketing ploy in history, more so than Beyonce's Lemonade. Maybe they feed us this tragic story and it bounces back with the greatest video game story of all time in The Last of Us Part 3. Until that happens, it's got me sitting here, trying to mentally repair myself from this, and all I can do is pretend that The Last of Us 2 never happened, and that they extended a cutscene from the first game out to the point where Joel brought her that guitar and played. That's my ending, and no one can tell me differently.
That's so dumb.
Yeah. Good night, kiddo.